Hey y'all, Arthur Fantastic here, aka the Hot Shot, coming back to you for part 3 of Sitting Guard is Disingenuous. Continuing on in this response video to Gil Alcocer, we are going to get into the second half where he is talking about roughly 3 arguments that big arguments, I don't know what that means, against pulling guard, which we all know is sitting guard. Okay, if you haven't watched part 1 and 2, I recommend you go back there, even watch my Ansumigeshi video. The problem is too many people are literally sitting to their butt, to the point where now we're creating metas of how we're going to fake sitting to our butt, get back up, get on top of them when they also decide to pull guard at the same time, because people are double guard pulling and getting on top to get the 2 points because you faked them out into pulling guard because you double guard pulled. That's a legitimate and totally logical within the rule set that is currently allowed meta. People are doing this, and this is just one of many little ways to game the system. When you make a system of rules, eventually people are going to game them. So, partially changing the rules, changing something about the competition helps it mature in a way. Some people think it's kind of gimmicky when you put it into a different environment, or we're going to change it into tournament rules. Or I like it. I like being able to see different types of competition, especially if they're trying to make it entertaining, and whether it's rules or kind of like making it a game where you can't do this XYZ, you know what I mean, which we see a lot in the ecological approach to grappling. It's fun, and so if we put these little games, you know what I mean, or approach it maybe in a different way, it doesn't necessarily have to be an ecological game, it could possibly change how we compete, you know what I mean? Making it team competitions like quintet, those are great, those are fun. So anyway, that was a short aside, just some thoughts on how rule sets will eventually be gamed by the players, and so we have to continuously make sure and tweak the rules so that we are keeping the players as honest as possible. People who play Dungeons and Dragons or set up role-playing or game encounters, which is now being poured into the ecological type approach to training, the players, the game, the rules. We're seeing this in a more 3-dimensional way than we did before. It's like, oh, just get in the mat. Well, we will, and we did, but now people are just pulling guard. You know what I mean? To the point where people are double pulling guard. Okay, as we discussed in other videos, people have discussed it. People are jumping in the airs and scissoring one another, and then hitting the ground because they both jumping double guard pulled. And that is a problem. It's a problem for many reasons other than it being disingenuous, but it's not true to the nature of combat. Combat doesn't always take place in a padded, safe space room surrounded by friends where, oh, ow, I kind of landed wrong. Hold on, just give me a second. Okay, that doesn't exist in the real world, and it shouldn't exist in the sport. But because we've created it to be such a thing, it has become. And people get really injured. I mean, we can really expand this conversation to a place where we're talking about the jumping guard and the jumping submissions, where we've seen people break their own neck from trying to do a flying armbar. we see often people breaking double knee breaks on the person who is being jumped on for jumping guard. Both of their knees go fucking backward, and they get turned into a ostrich or kangaroo. And it's just not kangaroo, ostrich. And it's so common, and that now we're talking about rules, some grappling competitions are now banning jumping guard, okay? In addition to being dangerous, in addition to what I'm discussing here, it's not realistic. People jumping for these submissions being being staying in the air for a long time because the other person just holds them up instead of dropping them, which ADCC I don't know what ADCC has kind of solved by allowing people to slam out of submissions. That's another thing. Like, why do people allow themselves to be picked up? Why are you allowed to pick somebody up and not slam them? Just to backtrack for a second, sometimes people have hurt their backs just by jumping guard and landing wrong. These people who are jumping for the flying armbar, since I'm going back here, they're on pads, double pads, the padding plus the the under padding, you got those puzzle mats plus the actual grappling mats or wrestling mats, which were on top of the springy basketball floor court. So it's because certain factors of the wedge or where you're the pivoting and how your body pendulums with all your weight onto your neck, it's dangerous. There's better ways to do it. There's ways to put people on their knees and then do it. You know what I mean? Not as in, we'd start from our knees, but rather you put them down onto their knees with a headlock or a whizzer or a number of things. You know what I mean? A slide by, a duck under. You know what I mean? And whatever. Not to go too far off track, but when we discuss these things, not only is it dangerous, it's just also not entertaining. People don't understand it. You're supposed to contend. You start standing, and this person just jumps, and it doesn't make any sense because if he put his forearm there, held you up, and then slammed you, as in the Tyron Woodley fights, it would be dangerous. But because you can't be slammed, you jump, and you do these flying arm bars, and we could argue about the different ways to enter flying submissions to make it more viable and less like, haha, I do this on mats. We could totally talk about that. There's tons of things we can talk about to break a person's posture down or whatever like that. But the overall point that I'm trying to make before we go into the response to this later half, which I'm try to be brief with my responses, so I'm trying to make this big point here at the beginning, is that how we look at competition and setting up and tweaking the rules shouldn't be like how karate looks at kata and fucking their competitions, and it just has to be this way because it's been this way. Okay, this is jiu-jitsu. This is jiu-jitsu right now, 2024, with the rules allowed like this, and everybody's training for it because the milieu of the BJJ training culture is beset, or rather orients itself to the sport rules. And that's what we see for most combat sports. It's going to be oriented to the sports. And that becomes a problem in karate. That becomes a problem in boxing. You know what I mean? We're losing large portions of the original art of boxing, which has, you know, grown just like all other martial arts, but it's also missing portions because you've taken out the wrestling, you've taken out a lot of things. You know, now it's becoming more incomplete, it's becoming more specialized. There's a lot more wrestling involved in boxing before, even into the 19th century. We see how those are becoming, you know, not everybody wants to watch a boxing match. Not everybody wants to watch a karate match, even the sports karate things, because they become so specialized, and it, you know, the threat of the takedown's not there, the entirety of the sport, and you know, you can enjoy it for what it is, but it's sports karate is not where it should be at because of what the rules are. And why would it be any different for BJJ? And instead of just begging the question, which he's about to do, why aren't we looking at the game and the players and keeping it honest for what combat is? Why is the question, oh, well, I can do it now. Why can't I continuously do it? Because the rules don't say that I can't do it. I mean, I have grips. It doesn't take much to train takedowns. It doesn't take much to engage the other person while going to the ground and trying to snatch a leg with your legs or your arms or whatever the fuck. It's not hard to engage a person and try to sweep them. It's not much, but instead of training that and preparing for that portion of the match, you're like, can't I skip it? I mean, why can't I just skip it? I mean, I'm so specialized in this other area. Why can't I just skip all the other areas? It's a ridiculous question to keep begging over and over again. And I hope that as this video goes, because it's going to go right to it, you'll really get a taste for how like disingenuous he is and how he's approaching the situation and the argument. And ultimately, he's as disingenuous as what he is trying to push. So I will lead you into the second half where he starts discussing these three large arguments. You know what I mean? He's so dismissive about it. He doesn't see them as big arguments, and he's going to set them up as straw men. And once again, he's going to beg the question non-stop, and he's going to make some false equivalences, and it's just like a pain in the ass. So, but here, hey, if this is part 3, we're here, and you're here because you want to see this shit. I'm here because I'm tired of hearing this shit, and I think it's worth discussing. And if we have to go to a part 4 because it takes so long and this opening's been so long, then we will go to a part 4. And you know, thank you for supporting, getting into the video now. Thank you guys.
So I've basically heard like 3 big arguments, 3.5 kind of arguments against pulling guard. And so I want to go over those and dismantle them right now. So stalling. Stalling's a big one. They say pulling or sitting guard, pulling guard is stalling. So again, how is that stalling? What about getting the match started and getting going is stalling? So
see how he tries to switch and force the viewer into thinking that sitting down is starting the match. No, the match starts when the bell or the whistle or the ref says begin, hajime, whatever he says. It's not sitting down. Sitting down would be the beginning of like at a table with lawyers and beginning a meeting at in a boardroom. Sitting down in a martial arts competition is not engaging. So in wrestling, for instance, they blow the whistle, you move backward away from your opponent, they can call stalling because you're moving back and away from your opponent. You're not engaging them. Even if you like touch their wrist and then start moving backward and circling, they can call stalling. So we look here, and if there's two people, right, even if he grabs the other person by the wrist, but then they sit down and backward, they are moving backward and literally not engaging the other person. Just because they touch their arm doesn't mean they engage. They're moving backward. This little hand touch is just an illusion. It's just an attempt to confuse the viewer into thinking that they're doing something that they're not, because they're sitting down and down and away from the opponent. Now, this is different from a person who goes directly down to go shoot into a person, like they take a knee. Maybe they'll be hand fighting, moving toward the person. Okay, this is different because they're not on their ass with both of their feet off the ground, losing all mobility. This is literally inviting the other person to say, hey, I'm conceding the standing portion, you engage me. Okay, now whether that is allowed in the rules does not go to speak on whether or not it is disingenuous. Is that genuine combat? Is that legitimate? Or are you just gaming the system so that you can begin where you want, get to the match where you want it to be, on the ground? Grappling starts standing. It usually results in a ground match when one person pulls the other one or throws the other one or puts the other one on the ground. By conceding the standing portion, you're conceding something. So it could at least count as 2 points for that takedown. But if you're being honest and, people are getting paid when we're looking at wrestling, they want them to go at it and contend with one another, fight this contest. Movement backward, just a little bit out backward, can be called stalling. So why do you think that moving backward and down away from your opponent is engaging, right? It's the opposite of engaging. It's going backward, and thus can be called stalling or minimum conceding. And why we discussed earlier the rules in some grappling competitions identify and acknowledge that going to your butt and pulling guard or sitting guard is conceding that standing, and will award the 2 points to the other person that would have gotten 2 points if they took them down. Sometimes you need to make contact with them, and now it counts as 2 points. It depends, and I think that the movement and tweaking of the rules will result, as I previously said, in fixing maybe any issues that we're currently having, which I believe to be the disingenuous pulling or sitting of guard. So how is it stalling? It's stalling because you're not actually engaging, you're moving backward, and the other person now just has to engage you on your back on the ground. Why do they have to do that? Why is that in any way why do you think you're entitled to that? Okay, the match starts standing. You just go to the ground, and you think that I have to go to you on the ground. Why do I have to? It's a legitimate question. Like, oh, because it's a competition, you have to contest with me. Oh, so you're gaming the system. You know that the other person has to contest with you, even though you have done the opposite of contending or contesting with them by moving backwards. Okay? This is stall call to force the other person to engage. Like Pride, you get a yellow card. Action. Action. Okay? I want to see action, not people sitting to the... There's no action sport or movie where the main focus is people sitting down. Okay? Unless they're sitting down in a tank. All right? It's a ridiculous question. Moving on.
So basically you're saying it's impossible to stall if you're on top.
No. That's not what anyone has said. That is not what anyone has asserted. That's not what anyone has suggested. What they have said is sitting guard is stalling. That's exactly the words that you said. So to mischaracterize it and then create a straw man directly after saying exactly what they're saying in opposition to pulling guard isn't stalling is just an example of how he's disingenuous and not willing to actually answer the questions that he's asking. Like, I couldn't even try to imagine being around this guy on a normal basis where this is how he discusses and argues with people. That light is red. So you're saying that all lights are red? No, I that's not what I say. So you're saying that if you drive a car, you have to go through red lights? No, that's not what I said. I said that light is red. What happened between point A that I made and his final point? There is no logical through line. He's just getting upset, saying something emotional and trying to throw it back in your face like a woman that you've been dating for a long time. Well, last week you forgot to throw out the trash. Except I did throw out the trash last week. And no one ever said that I didn't throw out the trash. Now we put it into the comparison of this scenario. No one's ever said, oh, well, you can't stall standing up. You can't stall in the top position. No one ever said that. In fact, if you look at through this entire series of the rule set discussion, going all the way back to the Sumigeshi one and all the ones after it and before, no one's saying that you can't stall in any other position or that you can't stall in the top position, that people don't stall while wrestling. We literally just discussed how there's stalling calls in wrestling to make sure that people stay engaged and keep the activity of the actual match going, as opposed to lulls because people get tired or they want to just keep the opponent to whatever shut them down. Okay, that happens. The shutdown, don't let them score any points on me, but it isn't happening by running away, because you can get stall called. It's by shutting down their grips and trying to weigh down on them. And that's its own discussion. If you don't know wrestling, that's a whole thing to look at. Just using it as a comparison, as a established rule set that's not by any means perfect, and showing you that not only is there a way to make sure people stay engaged, but as a matter of fact, we understand that you can stall in the top position, in the neutral standing position, or wherever the fuck you are. So, no, it isn't the point to say, oh, if you're in the top position, you can't stall. Where is he getting this?
That's your argument, is stalling on the bottom if you pull guard, but you can't stall on top. Is that what you're getting at?
Just to reiterate, once again, no one said that. That isn't the point. That pulling guard is stalling, but you can't stall in the top position. No one has ever said that or intimated that. Maybe some rare random person off on the side, but everyone knows, whether a wrestler or BJJ person, knows that they can stall on the top position, catch a breath. And that's why wrestling has rules to make sure that people don't do things like this. That's why MMA and other grappling rule sets have things like yellow cards to make sure that they're staying active. That's why that there are rules in place like the pin. Stop the stalling. You don't get to just lay on your back catch your breath while I'm on top of you. Like, get up or you lose. So there are things to counteract stalling, but if you just outright say something that is observably stalling, observably disengaging, and beg the question, well, why is this stalling, without actually listening to the argument, and then when you hear the argument, you hear, well, you're not stalling if you're standing. You're not having a conversation. You're actually a crazy person having conversations with voices in your head. This straw man you're arguing is actually an imaginary figure that you have created. No one is that person. No one has said, you cannot fucking stall while standing. Come on. What's alarming and low-key funny is that he thinks that he's gaining steam. Like, he's satisfied by you. You think that you can't stall stand up. Like, he's really satisfied by coming up with what he thinks is this genius argument that no one has ever said. No one has said this, and the people who have argued in this way before, you can't stall standing, have been shut down so directly, as I'm doing to Gil Alcocer right now. It just doesn't make any sense, other than you'll want to throw a tantrum so that you can continue doing the thing that you feel allows you to exploit and leverage your specialty without any consideration to the overall rule set and its application to combat.
Even worse, it's still not stalling on top if you're disengaging, anti-jiu-jitsu, ripping out and running away, walking away, and waving the guy up. That's not stalling. You're literally avoiding the grappling in a grappling competition. But that's not stalling. But sitting guard is stalling.
We have now switched over from discussing whether or not this is legitimate questions to ask, which they are, and he's dismissing outright and then creating straw men to dismiss them. But now he's asking whether or not the tactic or strategy of anti-jiu-jitsu and waving a person up is stalling. Let's address this directly. If a person can stand up, turn their back to you, and then wave you up, and you can't take advantage of that situation, you're out of position. If someone stands up, as I said previously, the immediate instinct of the person on the ground should also be stand up and meet them on the feet. Because in no other fucking scenario can you impose your will on another person by telling them, hey, get in my guard. It's ridiculous. So when you say when someone stands up and you stay on the ground and don't do anything, that is stalling. You're not following the action. He's getting up, removing himself from your entanglement, and you're saying, oh, why are you removing yourself from your entanglement and using your anti-jiu-jitsu, which he lauded that wrestlers had to learn before. You learn jiu-jitsu, but now this is no longer jiu-jitsu, it's just anti-jiu-jitsu, and it no longer has any purpose for his argument. He can just toss away those points that he was making before because they were disingenuous, just like his entire argument is. This anti-jiu-jitsu of getting out of the lock and then telling the other person to stand up too is just as legitimate as you sitting on your ass on the ground, because the rules allow it. And some rule sets literally say that you can do this. So if that's the case, then now you're just arguing about different grappling associations and their promotion and how they have their rule sets. It's no longer about this guard is stalling. You're just arguing about rules now. Because really, as I said, the entire argument is based on what the rules allow and not really based on what real combat is. So if the rules say that you can do that, then now you're arguing about the rules. You're not arguing about the concept of whether or not pulling guard is legitimate or it's not a problem. You're just begging the questions in other places, and you're talking about, oh, I don't like those rules. Well, that's their rules. Okay, you can have and compete in your own rule set, but that doesn't make your martial art more pure. You're not considering the points that you say are the big arguments. Instead, you're just immediately dismissing them and creating strawmen. Oh, well, you can't stall standing? Yeah, you can stall standing. But if you get up, you get out of their entanglement, and they don't get up too, doesn't it look like they're tired and they don't want to get up and they're lazy? It means you get up too then. Well, if they don't get up, it's stalling. Yes, that makes sense. You're stalling out there. They're going, they want to contend on the feet. You want to stay there and you won't get up. Imagine in any other like acting role, if you didn't want to get up during your scene, you just want to do all your lines sitting down. If you wanted to do if you want to be a cook, but you want to do all your cooking sitting down. I just could go on. It's fucking ridiculous that no one else understands. No one else understands why going to your butt is this defense-worthy thing that you can spend all this time defending but never actually questioning. And just real quick, like, what are you actually implying then too, while we're at it? Are you saying that we have to stay in your entanglement? That ripping out like someone rips out of an arm bar, like I have to then just lay back on top of you, or not even rip out at all, just give you my arm? Like, what are you implying? One of the technical escapes is stacking, pushing on the arms and ripping the arm out. That's an escape. It is a technique. It has been documented for a long time. It is a step-by-step thing. It's not something that you can call, this is wrestling, or they're just ripping out and they're spazzing out. This is how it is done. And I stand up out of it. Why would, if I took a step back as I rip out, why wouldn't you stand up and close that space to take advantage when I'm off balance? Why wouldn't there be a scramble? As we see in the more high-level athletic competitions, there's way more scramble. They're going for it. As one person stands up, the other person's trying to bring them down to the ground. Why is it that in that scenario, instead of, action, like go for it, why is it that you're like, I'm not stalling if I'm still sitting down. Like, he pulled away from me. I'm not stalling. Like, go for it. He pulled out from an attack. That's a legitimate defense and movement. Why does he then have to just lay back down on top of you? That's ridiculous. Why aren't you stand up going for the action? Why aren't you standing up? If a person gives you the space, why isn't going after that other person using your bipedal or quadrupedal capabilities of approaching them and taking them down and securing the top position? Why do you think, tactically speaking, that continually conceding the top position is a legitimate place to be, and beg the question, why can't I be here? Why is it stalling? Why is it this, that, the other thing? When it is predicated on the idea that the rules, you must engage that person on the ground. If the rules change, ladies and gentlemen, big note, big highlight this point, bing, 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 bing. If the rules change so that you can't do that, that's spending a certain amount of time after somebody has disengaged on the ground, you have to get up, or you is stalling or something like that, that will change all this fucking conversation in an instant. Because this fucking guard pulling shit, double guard pulling meta, where people are just like, I'm going to pull a guard to trick that other person to pull guard so I can get back up and get on top. If this is what this fucking makes, no one's fucking doing that in real life. So, having that skill set, being able to do that, it's not this impossible scenario that it will never faking a takedown, making someone sprawl. Not everyone has that sprawl reaction built into their mind. regardless, there is something about faking something and then going on top. You can't fault it for playing the game for how it is. But we need to change the game rules so that we can keep the players more honest. I think that's like a good way to explain this entire thing once again. I touched on it earlier. We're touching on it again. And I want to remind you, because the questions he's asking are so fucking ridiculous, you might get brain rot.
And then somehow this pawn is like good and okay because the guy on bottom wasn't taken down. So if you get taken down, then everything's okay. If you pull guard, it's not okay, it's bad. Where's the logic?
This is where the brain rot sets in. What is he even saying at this point? We've gotten so deep into this video, repeatedly saying that it's not about pulling guard, and no one is talking about pulling guard in the way that you pull a person down, sumigeshi, tomonagi, etc., etc., etc. Rather, sitting to guard, jumping guard even, which is significantly dangerous and is being banned by several grappling tournaments now because of the number of catastrophic injuries that are caused by jumping and putting all your weight on a person's body. Regardless, the point of what he's discussing is not anything like what anybody is actually talking about, which makes it so mind-numbingly like brain rot that my words aren't even working. The reason why people are okay with a person being taken down because it implies that they were contending and trying to take the other person down and stop the other person from taking them down. When a person just sits to their butt, I have a grip, and then I sit, or in many cases where there are no rules put into place to control such things, people could just sit out at range and then scoot in, literally butt scooting. That isn't legitimate. That's gaming. That's because there's no rules against it, I can do it, right? It becomes this not genuine combat art. Just to reiterate and emphasize, people do not understand from the outside someone sitting down in front of another person and then trying to be told, well, what you're actually seeing is a high-level jiu-jitsu player tricking that other person into their territory. No, they are sitting down and they're forced to engage them while they're sitting down. This wouldn't happen in any other situation. And even for hardcore fans, as I said multiple times, the CJI, these are the people who are buying tickets to watching it live. They're booing when people are fucking pulling guard. In some cases, not every case, in some cases. And so this is the conversation that's being had. He's not having this conversation. He's begging the question and having arguments with strawmen.
The stalling and the penalties should go for whoever is disengaging. There's a match. Someone pulled guard. You're here to grapple. Enter their guard, or however you want to approach their guard, and start to try to pass, start to grapple. Walking away and acting like you're too good to grapple with someone who pulled guard, that's just insane to me. This isn't wrestling. This isn't the sport of takedowns. It's a sport of submission grappling. So grapple.
So here we go again. He's making the same arguments I was making before that we've already established and identified as in itself disingenuous, where he is saying, well, this isn't not the sport of wrestling. This is the submission grappling, so grappling. As if the wrestling portion or the stand-up grappling portion, okay, to be more exact, isn't part of grappling. Rather, he's looking at it as, well, the guard and people being on top of each other on the ground, that's grappling. Standing up, that's just that's just where we start. Does like I don't know where the logic is. He's like, oh, where's the logic? But he is in himself avoiding any logical steps of progression of where the match starts to where you get. He's just like, why can't I do it this way? And then he's not listening to anybody's criticisms, and he's just saying, oh, well, this is the biggest arguments I heard. And he's attacking these arguments like they're unrelated, but I think that as I've been presenting through this 3-part series so far, it's probably going to go to 4 or 5, because I'm probably going to end it after this clip right here where I'm responding to. But it's all kind of interconnected why the pulling or sitting of guard, because sitting guard is disingenuous. I made that delineation specific, as I said many times already. I'm not going to go into it. I have to stop myself from doing it because I just want it to be clear. Next, he's talking about penalizing the competitor that is disengaging. Is he holding that standard consistently throughout his logical process? Because if he's being logically honest, if he's going to be completely honest, then you've got to look at a person sitting down and away, letting go of any kind of, after a little bit of a, oh, I have a grip and I sit down, now I can let go. If they don't see that as disengaging, then they're not being intellectually honest. That aside from what he's already presenting is another erroneous step in logic. Conversely, you're then saying that if a wrestler or a grappler that likes to stand up with their opponent or waves them up for whatever reason their tactic is, you're saying that if they break grips and step back, they're disengaging. Are you going to apply that to your guard pulling scenarios, which the majority of is literally people literally just dropping down to their ass or getting a grip and sitting down to their ass? It's not most of the Tomonagis, Sumigeshis, the pulling down into an actual entanglement. Are you going to be honest? Because right now you're not being honest, Gil. Most of all of this reasoning is based on his logical fallacy that he's been doing throughout, that he's been committing throughout. What's the right language there? Committing, doing. Is he's begging the question. He's like, why can't I just do this? Well, here's the question. Why should you be allowed to do this? Based on just the rules? Okay, so let's change the rule. We're talking about the rules now. We change it. Now it's become an argument about rules. Because he wants to ignore all of the arguments and just make them strawmen. I mean, then just simplify it. We'll make this about rules. Why should you be able to just do that? If you can't come up with a reason, then we should start banning that in tournaments. Just sitting to your ass and getting grips and sitting down and then letting go. Because you're literally saying that you should penalize people for doing essentially the same thing, even though I could see the tactic of telling a person to get up not only having entertainment value, but a high-level athlete. I'm going to test your cardio on your feet. You shouldn't be allowed to just sit there if you're in an athletic context where you're trying to submit another person. Get the fuck up and go. And it's not an insane logical leap that I'm making here or argument that I'm proposing when this is a competition. We're competing. We're not just trying to test our styles and this, that, the other thing. We're trying to go for the win. And in what way does sitting down reflect I'm going for the win? So we've gone through all these arguments a million times. We're going to keep going through this video. I am going to stop it here because we're hitting like the 45-minute mark. Like, what are we talking about? 45 minutes every part for like every 5 seconds in this video? Sorry about that, guys. But, I mean, it takes a second to fucking lie. It can take an hour or a day. It could take a lifetime to break the bonds of that lie and explain how in every single way that lie is a lie and it is wrong. You know what I mean? And since we got to get into this, why, then we have to get into this fucking brick by brick, point by point, telling you why you're fucking wrong and how this question isn't a legitimate question, or are you going to apply that logic to your own position, etc., etc. We have to go piece by piece. Not that I should you say, you shouldn't be able to pull guard and you don't question me, but because it's become such a why thing from him, I'm answering it. Listen, we have to address each one of his points, because most of his points are him asking questions, but unfortunately those questions are in the form of begging the question, not actually trying to let's look at how this game works if we're going to look at it as a game. You know what I mean? Like, or you want to look at it as a campaign, as a dungeon master. You want to look at it as a referee or a sanctioning body. Whatever it takes for you to look at the rules from a more objective situation, then I like playing guard. Why can't I just get to guard? Because that isn't what grappling. Guard isn't grappling. Guard is a piece of grappling. You get to guard. You find yourself in that position. You pull someone down into guard. You pull them into sumigashi. You pull them into tomonagi, etc., etc., etc. I said I wouldn't fucking just go through the entire fucking thing, but I did. It's not sitting on your ass. Why is it so hard to understand? It's not hard for most people to understand. And we're trying to present this sport to people. And people are asking, why can't I play this sport on my ass? Could you imagine someone playing basketball or boxing on their ass? Or fucking wrestling, or fucking, if they weren't like physically first impaired, or football on their ass? Can I play football or soccer on my ass? Why would you ask if a person can play on their ass other than that's the way that you like to play it? For you. Well, get somebody there. Why the fuck would anybody do this otherwise in any other situation for you being on the ground? So fucking ridiculous. I mean, that's a question I would like to beg you. Why is that a legitimate way to contend this sport? We've gone through the questions. I've gone through some permutations of what those answers might be. I've tried to be generous and steelman his position, but it's getting to a point where every single point that he's addressing is a straw man of the position of the people that are trying to oppose this sitting of guard situation. And, we've got knee deep in it, haven't we, boys? Well, meat's back on the menu because we've got fucking like another 9 minutes 47 seconds .2 to fucking respond to. And if you guys are enjoying this, like the video, comment below, discuss, am I right, am I wrong? What do you think about this so far? Do you like the arguments? Do you dislike the arguments? Hit me in the comments below. Add to this conversation. Let's create a cohesive one-part argument so that we can present it to people so it's easier. It's not going to be for me. I'm not the I fucking have such a fucking problem with this fucking. In what place would you want to teach someone to defend themselves and prop it up around this idea of sitting on your ass in front of a person? You're like teaching the student wrong. It's like Wimp Lo in fucking Kung Pao. Yeah, we teach him wrong on purpose. It's funny. It's joke. It's an absolute travesty what that's trying to make the martial art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which originally was judo, into this meme. Get in my guard. And we've got to push against it. So comment below, add to that conversation. And if you're liking this video, if you like videos like this, watch my other videos, subscribe. You've made it like almost 50 minutes into this video at this point. Might as well hit that subscribe button. And as I always say, stay up, stay vigilant, stay locked and loaded, stay brutal. Shalom, shalom. Peace in.